Have you ever said, "Did you hear me?" I know I have, but I wanted to let you asking the wrong question. We're going to learn about the definition of listening and the process in this video. Our other videos will cover listening challenges, the different types of listening, and most importantly, the skills that we can use. But we're going to start out with a little activity. I want you to grab a piece of paper and number it from 1 to 20. It can be scrap paper, get something to write with. And while you're doing that, let me give you instructions. I'm going to be reading a list of 20 items, and I want you just to listen to the list. And then I'm going to give you a minute or so to see how many you can recall. So no writing, no cheating. Do not write down the list that I read to you. I just want you to listen. Okay, are we ready? Use all your listening skills. And remember, no writing, we're just listening. Okay, ready? Cat, dog, ball, apple, tree, hammer, head, transom, square, door, magic, bird, hammer, feather, house, hammer, car, bus, king, jester. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to see how many of those words you can recall. Write them down on your paper and let's see how you do. All right, I've given you about a minute to see how many items you can recall. Let's see how you did. This is the order that I read each of these items. Yes, there are some. Hammer was 3 times. Cat, dog, ball, apple, tree, hammer, head, transom, square, door, magic, bird, hammer, feather, house, hammer, car, bus, king, jester. So how many did you get right? And what was easier to remember or more challenging to remember? We have, and it's interesting, our ability to recall, and we actually recall very little information. But if we wanted to look at recall, how much we recall, you probably recalled the first few items pretty well. But once we start getting down longer into our list, our recall drops. You also might recall the very ending words. That is often very typical. You also may have recalled hammer because I said it 3 times. We like to receive information that's more organized and in a particular order. Or if you can listen and take information and organize it, you will be able to recall more. You're going to learn about the value and the importance of listening. And so you can read that in your text and in this chapter. So I'm not going to lecture on that. I will tell you that in job interviews, sometimes the questions are asked just to test your listening skills. So if you aren't sure if you understood the question, please ask them to repeat the question. So my question is to you, are you a good listener? It actually isn't very easy. Right? Hearing In listening, sometimes we get confused. Hearing is the physiological process where the sound waves enter your ear, right? And so that's hearing. Listening is the ability to process and interpret and decode those messages. So hearing and listening are actually different. So what is listening? Here we have our definition: an active process of constructing meaning, right? Trying to decode or interpret from spoken messages through attention to verbal and nonverbal codes that accompany the message. Okay? And so sometimes you'll even hear the phrase active listening. It's very similar. Okay, so I do have several video clips in this PowerPoint. So again, just access the PowerPoint directly. And they're pretty funny, I think, some of them. But when we talk about listening, it's really a process, and there's 4 stages in the listening process: attending, understanding, responding, and remembering. And some of these are very similar to our perception process. First, something has to get your attention, right? You have to have the stimuli that grabs your attention so you can try to listen to it. So selecting, and that's what overlaps with our perception process. Then we try to make sense of it. We try to decode, we try to understand, right? You might be organizing your thoughts so that you can respond or react, right? So that's understanding. A response is also necessary in listening, right? And it could be a verbal or a nonverbal response. My husband often doesn't respond, and he knows this. I said one time my recliner was broken, so I said, "Oh no, my chair is broken." My husband, silence, nothing, no response. So I said it louder, hoping that might help. No, it didn't help. And finally, I had to really get his attention and ask him to come look at my chair. I've also learned that asking questions instead of making statements is more likely to get a response from the receiver. But your response is part of the listening process. And then last is remembering, the ability to recall information. And this is where a lot of you struggle with taking tests, right? You have to study and memorize and recall the information because it's no notes in some of your classes. For mine, we have our learning curves, which are open book, open notes, no time constraints. It's really pretty easy for you. But in some of your classes, you have to have that recall. And so your ability to recall information could stem from poor listening skills, right? Have you ever read a chapter or even a section of a book, your textbook, and you finish that section and you have no clue what you just read? I mean, really, you had to go back and reread it. Well, that's really a function of listening. The words on the paper, you're listening with your eyes, but you're just not processing that. And so sometimes when we are trying to recall, we stress out or we only can remember so much. And so when you can include all 5 senses, like when you're studying, seeing, hearing, talking about it, writing about it, even telling other people about it, you'll know, you will recall more information and you will remember more. So there's a couple of tips for you. Also, there's been research to show that if you have a peppermint or a stick of gum while you're studying and you do that again while you're taking your test, it does sometimes enhance your recall. So that might be a good study and test taking tip for you. Okay, so that's basically our definition of listening and our listening process. You probably already know some of your areas that you have more strengths or weaknesses, but let's take a look at challenges in our next video.